Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Richie, and welcome back to another Lawful Rebellion podcast. Thanks for listening on and sticking with us. Connect up with the Lawful Rebellion social scene at Facebook and Twitter to find out what's happening. Every day, more people wake up, and every day there's another news story meant to outrage you and separate us from each other. Remember, if you're feeling lonely and you want to meet others, then check out the Lawful Rebellion map at lawfulrebellion.crowdmap.com. It's March 2013 now, and change is happening faster and faster, some good, some not so good. The choice as always is yours as to what you put your energy into, and I want to bring your attention to people who are using their expertise and their talents to weaken the stranglehold of debt by breaking the spell that money and banking has on us all. The key players are factions of the banking empire, and today we're hearing from Spaniardo, who is about to attempt to bring private prosecutions against senior banking staff in an effort to bring to light the deceptions of mortgages and credit agreements which you never knew existed. You can find in-depth discussions and documents to download with this episode at lawfulrebellion.org, as Sai details how he discovered the inherent fraud within finance agreements and his own mortgage, how he proved the fraud outright, and how he discovered a core of compliant regulatory bodies controlling the external perceptions of the fraud, and his court case against the senior banking staff. Listen on for court dates and contact details. Please show your support for one of the heavy hitters, Spaniardo of the White Rabbit Education Trust. I hope you enjoy. What I will do is I'll do just a little silly intro like I normally do. But Spaniardo, thank you very much for coming on and talking to me again. The other day, on the March 2nd, you sent through an email with 22 attachments, and you're detailing your exploits with the mortgage company, with Santander, and much more. What we're intending to do is put this pack up for people to disseminate over the website, but it'd be really good if we could kind of be talked through it a little bit as to the implications and the importance of this particular document pack.
Yeah, sure. No worries. Well, thanks for having me on, Rich.
It's a pleasure.
What I would say to anyone that's coming across, this podcast, the attachments, is that once you've listened to this, and hopefully I won't have bored you silly, go and have a look at the White Rabbit Trust YouTube channel, because there are a couple of videos which kind of bring to life and paint the picture a little bit clearer as to what this is all about. And those videos are the ones of, you've got the FSA video, you've got the hidden power of attorney video, and then you've got how credit really works, all right, or what lies behind your credit. So in essence, what you've got is you've got two dossiers, one of which attacks unsecured credit and the other attacks mortgages. Now, the unsecured credit dossier, some of the information regarding promissory notes, that's the security, that's also the credit agreement that you sign. So that's also known as a security or a promissory note, and it is negotiable. There's citations, definitions, references which prove that that instrument is treated as cash for accounting purposes. And that particular unsecured dossier, which was sent off to all the parties which are listed therein, so we're including the Financial Ombudsman Service, the Office of Fair Trading, the British Bankers Association, Vince Cable, who is the Minister in charge of the finance industry, the Attorney General, Solicitor General, various other parties. They were all invited to correct any of the contents of that document. And I have received no corrections. I've received some responses, but I have received no corrections at all.
So what kind of responses have you actually received?
Well, I copied it off to every single chief constable in the country, together with every police and crime commissioner, because, I've been trying for 18 months or so to report the fraud. And of course, the situation is, for anyone that tries this, is that the police are not qualified to deal with it. So they were consistently referring me over to the Financial Ombudsman Service, and this was with regards to unsecured credit and the theft of those securities. In other words, banks wanted me to pay them off, and they weren't going to return my currency, which is the credit agreement, right? The actual piece of paper that's signed.
Mm-hmm.
That's theft. Now, I was trying to report this, and as I say, the police were referring me over to the Financial Ombudsman Service because the police were operating under the illusion that the Financial Ombudsman Service would report all instances of fraud committed by banks back to the police. Having spoken to Adrian Daly, head of policy at the Financial Ombudsman Service, it was made abundantly clear to me, both in speaking to him and by way of Freedom of Information request, that they do not report any instances of fraud to the police. In fact, Adrian's feedback was, if you think you've had fraud committed against you, report it to the police. So we have the police referring people to the Ombudsman Service, and the Ombudsman Service referring them back to the police. And all the while, the fraud continues, and nothing gets done. So what that basically prompted me to do, because I had gone through a bankruptcy, I effectively wanted to reopen up that bankruptcy, which I did, and there was a hearing. I think it was the end of January time or early February time. Quite a few people came down. We had a good laugh. I didn't win. I didn't manage to get it opened again, but I was trying to get the official receiver to go and collect the assets due back to me and offset them against the bankruptcy. And if he'd done that, I would have been quids in. He acknowledged in his paperwork that Section 323 of the Insolvency Act 1986 does entitle people to what's called offset or set-off, and HMRC website confirms the same. In other words, if I owe you £100, Richie, and you owe me £200, there's no point engaging in two transactions. Let's just offset it, and then you owe me the £100. I think I've remembered that transaction correctly. So you owe me the difference, right? Or I owe you the difference, whichever way it sets off. So we're entitled to this, and of course, once you understand that the document that you sign as a credit agreement, credit card agreement, store card agreement, lease agreement, hire purchase agreement, loan agreement, mortgage agreement, once you understand that those instruments are actually treated as cash, and that the bank doesn't lend you anything, you in fact make a deposit with the bank. This is a truer picture of what goes on. If they advertise that they lend you something, they should lend you something, but a trick played by the bank is that you make this deposit of a security, which you didn't know was a security. That is treated as cash. That creates a credit entry, and all the bank or finance company does is give you access to that credit entry. So you've effectively lent yourself the money, and the bank risked nothing. Now that is fraud.
And this applies to virtually any credit agreement that you can think of, any type of financing agreement that you've made where you have signed an agreement to say that you will get this amount of money and pay back over a period of time.
With interest, yeah.
Yeah, people hear it a lot and maybe don't quite fully appreciate the impact, but essentially your signature upon that document is what creates the funds.
It is what creates the funds. What people have to understand, and it's difficult to get your heads around at first. It was extremely difficult for me, coming from the banking industry, to get my head around this. Mm-hmm. It took me a couple of years. It really did, right? Yes, I could spout what I'd heard others say and so on and so forth, but it didn't really resonate with me for a couple of years. People have to understand that the entire commercial system, the money which we're passing around, isn't actually money. I know we can go and buy things from shops and so on and so forth, but when we look at the true definitions of money throughout the ages, that is not money. It is a token, it is a medium of exchange, but it's not money. In fact, it's got more in common, the notes we pass around now have got more in common with monopoly money than they have with real money. And once people get that concept into their heads and understand that all companies are actually bankrupt, right? They're all bankrupt. They are operating in a game of bankruptcy. Okay, now yes, companies can go bust within that game, but it's just very much like us playing a game of Monopoly where I've got a load of fake money, I'm the dog, that's my play piece, I've got a load of fake money, It's not real, and even within that game of Monopoly, I can go bust. But the game of Monopoly itself has no real money and is bust already. It's already bankrupt, that game of Monopoly. All right, so I'm hoping that's kind of come across in a nice, easy way to understand. But once people understand that, and understand that in order to propagate that system, we, the people, actually have to sponsor credit in order to oil the wheels of commerce. And that's been achieved in two ways. The first way is that when we're signing these notes, these bits of paper, what we call loan agreements or credit agreements or finance agreements, that document is cash. It's treated as cash for accounting purposes. So when you hand over a loan document, you're doing the exact same transaction as if you're putting £100 into your savings account. You hand it over to the cashier and £100 appears on the credit. So that's on their books. I'm now in credit £100. All right. Now, the difference between paying £100 into a savings account and taking out a £10,000 loan is that the bank or the finance company changes the word savings and they replace it with the word loan. Right? That's all they do. The operation is exactly the same. So when I hand over that loan document, £10,000 now appears in the credit of an account for me to go and spend. But what I didn't know was that that £10,000 was mine already. So that's one aspect of it, is the bookkeeping. But the second aspect is that, of course, we've not been taught, when we went to school, we've not been taught that what we're actually doing is creating money and that those instruments are treated as money. That's a very valuable piece of information that is deprived and kept from us so that we go out ignorantly handing over more than we should. Now, in realizing all of that, and as I say, for me, coming from the banking industry, having had it ingrained in my brain for 20 odd years as to how things worked, it was very difficult for me to turn that arse about face. But once you do, and once you see it for what it is, it becomes very, very simple and it gets easier. It's just like riding a bike, it gets easier with practice. So don't be put off, people, at first if it seems difficult. It's learning a new language. It's like riding a bike. It's like doing something, from scratch for the first time. At first it's complicated. At first it's difficult. But with practice, it gets easier. And eventually it becomes very easy so that you can roll it off the tongue like I do and like Richie does and like other people do. So so stick with it. So in trying to pursue that with the bankruptcy, just going back to that story, that's now led to private criminal prosecution, which is going to be taking place, I'm hoping to initiate on the 12th of April. 1:30 down at Southend Magistrates Court. Anyone's welcome if they want to come and have a laugh. And we'll see whether or not we can actually get the court service to take forward or allow me to initiate a private criminal prosecution against the banks for fraud. So that's fraud by false representation. That's for not advertising properly the true nature of these accounts. All right? Because ultimately, I've got no problem if a bank wants to lend or give you access to your own credit and not lend anything. What I do have a problem with is that they don't tell you that's what they're doing. Because if they did tell you that's what they were doing, the chances are not many people would do it. Right? Because it's placing all the risk on the side of the customer. So just like Granny and Grandad said, never borrow money, they were giving you good advice, but we just never heeded that advice, and they never explained why that was a good thing to heed. So we've found it out the difficult way. However, that then kind of led me neatly onto taking that information and rolling that into an ongoing issue that I had with my mortgage company. And of course, there's lots of people out there with mortgages. Lots of people are finding things tough. And so what I wanted to do, and what I'll do now, is I'll briefly take you through what happened with my mortgage and how I've managed to not pay that since May of last year. And then I'll explain the dossier and how the information contained within the dossier and all the accompanying paperwork can be used. So I know there's lots of people out there, very intelligent people, all studying law, banking, using various different arguments and approaches. None of them are wrong. Okay, we know that there may not be success in the court system because the court system is, after all, a privately owned company, registered as the Ministry of Justice on Dun & Bradstreet, trading as Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunals Service, and of course that company, like any company, is going to want to ensure that its big customers, that will be banks, are well looked after. And so that unfortunately means that when the little guy, me or you, goes into court, if we're up against the bank, then the judge who is a corporate officer posing as a public servant, acting and masquerading as a judge, when that guy or girl gets hold of the paperwork, the chances are that they are going to look after their own job security and find in favour of the bank. And it doesn't matter what the law says, it doesn't matter what justice is, they're going to be bound by conflicts of interest, and they are going to probably find against you. And that's what we as people have pretty much been coming up against.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I thought to myself, right, okay, everyone's got their own circumstance. Some people are okay and blasé about maybe giving up their home and then they're happy to go off travelling and do whatever. Everyone's got their own circumstance. I myself, I've got my set of circumstances, and I'll be damned if I'm going to give up the property without a fight. And so what I did was without wanting to cause conflict with the mortgage company, for 3 years, when I first, going way back when I first started finding out about this stuff, so 4 years ago in actual fact, I'd found out that there was perhaps a hidden power of attorney I wasn't aware of. And this is bearing in mind that I'm a qualified mortgage advisor, and I still didn't know this stuff, right? So it shows how naive or negligent I was as a qualified mortgage advisor. So I started inquiring with Santander, and for 3 years I was told verbally every now and then, no, there is no power of attorney. No, there is no power of attorney. And my simple questions were, is there a power of attorney? Did I invoke a power of attorney when I signed the mortgage deed, which enabled you to do things on my behalf or in my name? And if so, what have you done? And that is it, right? Very simple. In other words, for people out there, just imagine that you give your neighbour or your friend the authority to do anything in your name and on your behalf. Would you or would you not want to know what they've done?
I think you'd pretty much want full disclosure on everything.
You would, and you have an absolute right to know that, right? And let's face it, using a government line, if they've done nothing wrong, then they have nothing to hide and nothing to fear.
That's perfect.
Okay? So, using just that core base question, before knowing anything else, just having the gut feel that, well, did the mortgage company tell me I was going to be giving them a power of attorney beforehand? No. And as a mortgage advisor, I can tell you, did I ever advise any of my customers that this is what would happen on a mortgage? No, because I didn't know, right? Because we as mortgage brokers were trained by the banks. They told us what to tell customers. They told us the key features of each product. They would supply us with handouts and key information, and I can assure everyone out there that details of the powers of attorney were not included on that key information. I wonder why, right? Well, I'm about to tell everyone why. So in essence, I took that question forward with Santander, and to cut a long story short, it led to me disputing the account, and everything was referred over to the Financial Ombudsman Service. Now, when an account goes into dispute, and an account is disputed when one party disputes it, don't allow yourself to be misled by the bank or the mortgage company saying, well, we've decided it's not in dispute, therefore it's not, right? Literally, if one side is disputing it, it is by pure definition in dispute. And so I've gotten around that kind of BS argument by saying to Santander, well, if it's not in dispute, you must have an answer for me. And Santander have not been able to answer those two questions for me, right? I can assure, this is now 4 years, and they have not wanted to answer this question. So it's obviously an important question. And that is, to recap, when I signed the mortgage deed, did I invoke a power of attorney enabling you to do things in my name and on my behalf? And if so, this is part 2 of the question, what have you done? Now, as I say, for 4 years, Santander have not wanted to answer that question, or those two questions. I even have it in writing twice, signed by Santander, stating that there is no power of attorney, categorically. The second of those letters was attached to the terms and conditions from Santander. And bearing in mind that Santander sent me that letter after 3 weeks' intense investigation, I was surprised because within 5 minutes I found the hidden power of attorney under section 28, 28.1 and 28.2 of Santander's standard terms and conditions.
And am I right in thinking this is covered on your YouTube video?
This is covered on the YouTube video.
Excellent.
So what I've basically done is I've now taken the option whereupon, in sending that over to the Ombudsman, I now want to keep this mortgage in dispute for as long as possible, because while it's in dispute, I'm not paying it. I ignore any of their automatic letters. In fact, I've offered to go and speak to Santander. I've offered to pay the whole mortgage off on condition that they return the mortgage deed in exchange and that they explain what they've done in my name. And strangely enough, they don't want to talk to me. Right? I've offered to speak to any of their 43 solicitors. They don't want to talk to me, and they are running scared. So seriously and obviously, something is up with this power of attorney. So what is it that our research has found that they do with this power of attorney? Well, this is actually covered in not only the videos on the White Rabbit Trust YouTube channel, but it's also covered in the dossier, which you can download off of TPUC. This is for everyone out there. Very simply, the documents, just to go through these documents first and foremost. If you're going to be taking or challenging your mortgage company, first things first, if you want to do it from the perspective that I've done it, all right, and this is where I'm attacking the FSA, Financial Services Authority, Principle 7, which is that the client's information needs are effectively paramount, and that all information must be clear, fair, and not misleading. And it is the client's information needs that are paramount. Right? Which means I want to know what they've done with the power of attorney. Well, that's my information need. I'm the client, so what's the answer? Now, I've stayed on point. They have attempted to distract me. You have to stay on point. And I keep bringing them back to the same questions which they find uncomfortable to answer and they cannot answer. So, attacking it from that point of view, in other words, that they have missold me or misrepresented this product, that's going to bring in the Fraud Act 2006, sections 1 to 5, fraud by false representation, 10 years jail time. Okay, so this is the perspective I'm coming from. And coming from that perspective, right, the dossier and how you should use it. I've got 2 samples of letters that I sent to Santander. So people are welcome to look through that. Don't just copy it down verbatim, all right, because that's going to do no good. You need to read those letters because they're specific to my particular circumstance. So you need to read that, and then you need to, kind of recraft some of that and make it specific to your own circumstance. That's for people out there, right? But in essence, try and reword some of the stuff about the power of attorney. I've quoted Santander's terms and conditions, and obviously any quotations from their terms and conditions should, be copyable because it is what it is. But apart from that, try and make it your document if you're going to query that. Okay. What I've then done is I've produced what's called the FSA dossier. mortgage dossier.
Mhm.
And that effectively highlights in letter form, again, it's come from me, so you might want to change some of the bits that don't relate to you out there. But the key information takes you through the key definitions and citations which show that a promissory note is treated as cash. That's the security. That is the true security for a mortgage, believe it or not. It's the actual promissory note. It's not the bricks and mortar. That's just one trick that's in a mortgage contract, as far as I'm concerned. It's actually the note which you promise to pay the mortgage back on. Now,
so to be clear, that's the signed mortgage promissory note that actually creates the funds in the first place.
absolutely.
That's the asset that they're actually going to try and...
That's the asset which they are using to create the credit entry in their books. They're going to deposit that into an account, create the credit entry, and then you use the credit, and you've effectively lent yourself the money. Now, a lot of eagle-eyed people and sharp-eared people out there will say, but I didn't sign a promissory note when I applied for the mortgage. All I signed was an application form and a mortgage deed. And you'll be absolutely correct. You didn't sign a promissory note. Now have a guess what that power of attorney is used for. You see, the power of attorney is used by the mortgage company so that they can create and sign documents in your name. And one very important document that they are going to sign in your name and on your behalf without your knowledge is the promissory note.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why do you think they want to keep that secret?
Well, if that gets out, it's game over.
It's game over, because that is the cash. That is the advance. We, the people, are lending the mortgage company the money. Now, is Simon the Spaniard talking complete crap? Well, no. In fact, what I've done attached to the dossier, you will find some other documents, all right? So, for example, I've got an IMF. This is the International Monetary Fund publication. It's called the Chicago Plan. You can actually find it. You can either download it from the IMF website, which you'll have to pay for, or some kind soul has actually already loaded it up onto Google. So I downloaded it for free, and you can now download it for free. But that document, which I think was initiated back in 2009, is a working document, last updated February 2012, I believe, and you've got academics. Now, these academics, obviously massively brainy, they have gone in and explained how money and banking works in today's age. Mm-hmm. And there are some interesting quotes to be had from there, because they actually, one particular academic describes the method of banking nowadays as a mode of transferring collateral from the people to the banks, which is true. Because when granting a mortgage, or when giving you the mortgage advance, and I've got to get my terminology correct, the mortgage is what you grant over the security. It's the charge over the security, or the grip over the security. Mm-hmm. Okay, but mortgage companies call them, you apply for a mortgage. So I don't want to be too confusing. But anyway, so the big loan that we use to buy our home or remortgage, the mortgage company does not actually lend that. Okay, this is the big thing. It's exactly the same as unsecured loans, credit cards, whatever. It's the document that we supply to the bank or the mortgage company, which enables the mortgage company to enter that into its books as a deposit, which creates a credit entry so that we, the people, are now in credit, and the mortgage company merely, via quite a few different transactions, disguises that and then presents that to us as we're borrowing something that we didn't have before.
I've actually got here on page 34, this means that banks cannot lend by creating new deposits, period. Rather, their loan portfolio now has to be backed up by a combination of their own equity and non-monetary liabilities.
Absolutely. And I think what it's talking about, that document is actually talking about how banking has gotten out of control, or alleged lending has gotten out of control. And it also explains, it describes loans or mortgages as a currency exchange. So in other words, it's a currency exchange. This is a nice way of looking at it. We're exchanging our paper currency that we sign. So we are the creator, the maker of the note, which is treated as cash. We give that over to a bank, and then the bank gives us access to electronic funds on its computer systems. Now, the thing is, again, there's nothing wrong in that, but they don't tell you. And there's something very wrong in them not telling you, because the true deal that they are actually offering, which I'll come on to in a moment, but the true deal is just outrageous. No one would go for it if they presented it in a true fashion. But I'll just talk through these other documents. So you've got this IMF publication, and I've then attached the affidavit of Walker Todd. Yes, it's Americanized, but for anyone that wants the ins and outs as to how these accounts are set up, that affidavit will tell you how. I've then got the modern money mechanics, which is from the Federal Reserve Bank. Explains how money is fractionalized and how it's created from thin air. So this is for any bank staff or mortgage staff or police or whoever you're liaising with that doesn't believe that money is created from thin air. Don't you try and argue it with them. Let them argue with the International Monetary Fund, Walker Todd, and the Federal Reserve Bank. Right? And in actual fact, there's another document which I could have added to that, which is the Bank of England publication, January 2001, called The Future of Money Market Instruments. You can download it off of Google, and that explains how bits of paper are actually, this is why banks destroy bits of paper now, because they're just transferring the electronic digits around. They're destroying the evidence. And by destroying credit agreements and mortgage deeds and all these other things that they destroy, or so they say are destroyed, I think a fair proportion are sold. And if they're sold to the right institution, they just destroy them and do it electronically anyway. But by destroying the paper, what they're actually doing is they are removing the evidence of the fraud. And this falls under the Theft Act 1968, Section 17, under false accounting. Because that document, okay, the existence of that document shows that the bank or the finance company was bound to lend you something.
And would, this makes them the holder in due course, is that correct, when it comes to mortgages?
They are the holder in due course on the note, but it's also evidence that they had to lend you something.
Yeah.
And their books, and this is the reason they never want to show their books, okay, their books would show that they didn't. Now, another excuse with the books, if you ever try and call the books in, or you want to see them, they will say, well, it's commercially sensitive information. Poppycock. Because the argument that rebuts that is as follows. There are millions of accountants out there, and companies regularly change their auditors. KPMG gets changed for PricewaterhouseCoopers or whatever they're called now.
PricewaterhouseCoopers, yeah.
PricewaterhouseCoopers, yeah. Or whatever other big firm. Now, how can they change firms of accountants if every company does its accounts differently? Because they don't. They do their accounts in exactly the same way. And in fact, I even have a book here, which is the codes on how the accounting works internationally, right? So it's standardized. So there's nothing commercially sensitive about the way that the accounts are done. So could it be that there's something commercially sensitive about all the other contractors that they deal with and how much they pay them? Well, maybe, but that's not what I'm wanting to see. What I want to see is where their books show that they lent me anything. So when you're only after the accounting entries relating to you and they claim it's commercially sensitive, yeah, it's commercially sensitive, because to show you would reveal the fraud, which is commercially making them a lot of profit.
Yeah, and it would probably bring down most of the commercial lending system.
And it would send them to jail. It's commercially sensitive. It's very sensitive information. So sorry to go off at a tangent on that one. So back to the dossier then. So we have the dossier, which literally explains and raises lots of questions about how a mortgage is sold, marketed, created, the advice and information given, conveyancing, the problems with conveyancing and conveyancers, the problems with registration of that mortgage and why the mortgage deed is void, the problems as to why the registered mortgage at Land Registry is void, Okay, all the case law, all the citations, and it's not an exhaustive list. There's more information to come, I've got no doubt, but it gives you plenty of questions and information to get going on. And what I would suggest is that if you're going to take the approach that I've used, which is to get it into dispute and keep it in dispute, then you want to drip feed those bits of information. Don't do it all at once. Don't, fire the whole machine gun all at once and have no bullets left. I would literally start off with the power of attorney. And for that, guidance on that, just look at the 2 letters that I've attached from, which were my ones to Santander. Look at the way that I've kind of worded it and constructed it, and just stay on track with the one question about the power of attorney, what they've used it for. Now, as I say, I've also attached a Freedom of Information request which was made on the Financial Ombudsman Service. And just as a side caveat, what that actually shows are the huge salaries that general members of staff are on over at the Financial Ombudsman Service. Because the Financial Ombudsman Service is a complaints handling service. Its customers on its own website are defined as the banks. We, as consumers, are just pains in the arse. So the Ombudsman Service, which works for its customers, banks and other financial institutions, gets passed complaints to look after for the banks. Now, these are complaints that banks used to deal with themselves before the Financial Ombudsman Service came into being. Okay, so one questions, well, how on earth did the banks deal with complaints beforehand, right? Well, nowadays, banks deal with complaints by not answering them, letting them go 8 weeks, and then they bung it over to the Ombudsman Service, where they pay the Ombudsman Service 450 quid a pop to handle complaints. And therefore, it's in the Ombudsman's interest, the Financial Ombudsman Service, it's in their interest to keep their customers happy. So using common sense, does that mean that if they were aware of skullduggery, that they would dob in the banks?
No, I mean, I see it very much like you. It's almost like it's a facade. It's something that appears as though things are being investigated. It appears as though there's a reputable office for people to kind of resolve these sorts of queries, but the reality is the exact opposite. This is what they want.
Absolutely spot on. Because, and I've had this out with the Financial Ombudsman Service, and this is why I wanted to get this over to the Ombudsman Service. A, because of my circumstance. I didn't have the ability with my circumstances to just take the mortgage head on, go via court, and so on and so forth. I felt more comfortable with, given my circumstance here, to actually take it via the Ombudsman and manage the Ombudsman. Right, and that's what I'm planning. That's the way I'm playing it. So you're absolutely correct. It is a facade, as well as these case fees, complaints handling fees. Banks actually pay standing fees to the Financial Ombudsman Service, and I'll give you an example. Santander paid £7 million. To the Financial Ombudsman Service for 2010-2011 alone. Now, the Ombudsman Service has the ability to reimburse, I think it's just gone up to 175 grand as a penalty, right? Or reimbursed payments, etc. But it can waive any balance. Now, bearing in mind, in that Freedom of Information request, people will see that the Ombudsman Service keeps a record of trips and falls. There were 6 trips and falls, I think, from memory in 2011, 2012. 41 incidents where the first aider had to get involved. But they don't keep records of how many payouts between £100,000 and £150,000 they awarded. They don't keep records of how many instances of fraud have been committed by banks.
I wonder if there even are any, and that's why they haven't reported them.
Well, I figure there are nowadays, with us lot getting involved.
Yeah, true.
But they don't keep a record of it. And so what we have is we have a board. Like they actually have a kind of oversight board, and then they have an operating board. And the oversight board, which is made up of a few people, they met, I think it was 11 times last year. And the chairman got paid. The chairman of that board got paid 75 grand. Right? I think there were one or two other subcommittee meetings, but I mean, you're talking no more than 20 meetings, 75 grand. Well, I mean, I'd take that job tomorrow.
It's not a bad day's work, is it?
Not a bad day's work. and basic call handlers, so these are the people you get onto the phone with when you first start, they can earn up to 51 grand a year as a basic salary.
Good Lord.
Way more than I was earning as a bank manager. But the most damning piece of information that I have on the Financial Ombudsman Service is this. The week prior to me phoning up and placing my mortgage complaint over with the Ombudsman Service, having gone through Santander's 8-week period of silence, was that the young lady who I spoke to confirmed to me, as I was trying to explain all this stuff to her anyway, she confirmed that every member of staff at the Ombudsman Service had been notified as to the true mechanisms of mortgages the week before.
Wow.
So, people out there, don't be fobbed off by the Ombudsman Service. They know. They know precisely how it works. And if they are protecting that fraud, they are guilty of fraud.
Huh. If you're sitting on 45 to 50 grand a year to pick up a phone, seems to me like if you weren't so concerned that it wasn't affecting you, you might carry on doing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what we need to do, and this is where, this is my attitude where it comes in, is that we need to then make it matter to them.
Yeah.
So a few private criminal prosecutions might make it matter. And so, I'm certainly not backwards about coming forwards and talking to these people. Excuse my home phone going there.
Yeah, sure.
I'm certainly not backwards about taking these people on and saying, no, this is what's happened. I know you're aware of it. Don't lie to me. You come out with any...
Si? Okay, hold on a minute, folks. Si has just disappeared off the line. I'm going to see if I can get him back. Kicked in again, so take it away.
Right, okay, well, apologies for everyone for that gap. I'm going to try and remember. It's been a lengthy gap, so I'm going to try and remember where I was at. So I was talking about the dossier and all the attachments that have been sent out. And I think from memory I've covered the fact that we've got the two letters that I sent to Santander. We've got the main mortgage dossier, and the main mortgage dossier and the main attachments to that dossier are Modern Money Mechanics, the IMF publication, and the affidavit of Walker Todd.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would suggest for anyone out there that's embarking on maybe challenging or investigating their mortgage product that they feel free to refer to any of that information and send those publications, especially the IMF one, over to bank staff, Financial Ombudsman Service staff, mortgage staff, police, whoever, right? Because it helps educate them.
Sorry, you said previously that they should be familiar with these things anyway because they've already been informed as to the correct goings-on of a mortgage, right?
Sure, they should be. For the Financial Ombudsman Service, just to recap, 1 week before I reported my claim over with the Ombudsman Service, all members of staff at the Ombudsman Service were notified in meetings and via newsletter as to the true operation of a mortgage product, especially regarding the promissory note and what it really was and who actually lent who the money. Mm-hmm. So the Ombudsman Service staff know, and that is first-hand from the horse's mouth, although I wouldn't call her a horse, she seemed like a nice lady, but it came from her, one of the members of staff at the Ombudsman Service, and she was a call handler that took my call.
Okay.
Right? So even the lowly staff all know about it. So anyone that says otherwise is lying. But that aside, it's always nice to present the information to show them that you know what you're talking about and to watch them and enjoy it. Watch them try and squirm out of it, right? And that's I get kicks from playing that game and watching people try and squirm. So, enjoy the power that it gives to you, because knowledge is power, and this knowledge is going to give you all power and self-empowerment. So I would certainly recommend that people adjust, that dossier or take bits from it and drip feed the complaints over to the Ombudsman Service if that's the way you want to go. And certainly the power of attorney is what I would focus on first, because it is the most beautiful and most obvious question to raise. It doesn't raise any eyebrows about free man stuff, or he's a sovereign citizen, or this, that, and the other. It's a natural question that anyone would ask, and it is a natural way of putting it. Did I give you a power of attorney? And if I did, what have you done in my name? And why did you need it? I've got two hands. Why do you need to sign documents on my behalf? I've got two hands. What are you hiding from me?
Yep. If you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to hide. It's very simple.
Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And so the other accompaniments with that dossier are a whole host. Apart from the unsecured dossier, there's a host of American documents which are designed to help people understand how money works and how loans work. I wouldn't suggest that you send that on to anyone over here, because you always get the argument, it's American, it's American.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, banking is banking. English banks are over in America. Santander's a Spanish bank, that's over here, and it's in America. Bank of Scotland is in America. RBS is in America. And American banks actually buy the notes and actually fund Santander, JP Morgan, and Bank of America. So they're all interlinked, and they all work on double entry bookkeeping, and it's all the same across the planet.
Right.
So don't ever be distracted by that bullshit argument, right? So, as I say, there's some American documents there which help explain how that all works for anyone that's relatively new to this. And then there's the Financial Ombudsman Service Freedom of Information request, which really shows the conflict of interest in terms of high salaries being paid to members of staff over at the Ombudsman to protect their customers being banks and other financial institutions. They are defined as the Ombudsman's customers, and it is always going to be in the Ombudsman's interest as a company in business to make profit. It made £20 million last year. It's a growing business. It's in their interest to keep their customers sweet, and with that in mind, you are not going to see the Ombudsman wanting or racing to give a massive judgment against one of its customers and undermine what its customers are doing. But it is a lot of fun watching them squirm and watching them delay the decision-making process, and then if they don't come up with the right decision after a full investigation, which should have led them to come up with the same conclusions we have, because we've investigated for many, many years, right? If they can't come up with the same conclusion and they don't even touch on some of the points we raise, well, then they are by default engaging in fraud and deception. And that then means that they are open to attack. And we can prosecute them or start leaning them or start playing whatever games we want to play with those guys. All right? But it is fantastic as a delaying mechanism. All right?
Sure.
It's a delay mechanism. All right? So I know that the gap has kind of, in the call there and the recording has kind of, thrown things off a little bit. But, where is it that I'm kind of taking this? Well, I produced a video with the FSA, and this dossier was produced for the FSA, because what I'm trying to do, Rich, is I'm obviously from that world, as it were. I know a lot of people all worked for companies at some point in time in their existences. There's only a few people that probably never did, but I did. I just happened to have been in banking. And so I kind of understand the way that they play things behind the scenes. Not 100%. I was never privy to all the top boy stuff. But, I know what the environment is like. And, I speak their language, as it were. And so what I'm trying to do within that dossier, and people will see it for themselves, I'm trying to broker a deal. Because, let's use logic and common sense. If the banks want to continue, as described in the words of the IMF publication, just shifting real property from the people over to the banks by way of fake loans where the bank has no risk whatsoever, and all the risk is the risk of the customers. In other words, this is the contract that the bank offers to you. How do you fancy signing this document, which turns that document into cash? You can deposit that with me, I'll let you withdraw that or spend that credit, but you're then going to have to pay me back, and you're going to have to pay interest. And if you don't pay, I'm going to take your house or your car or your possessions. And when it's all done and dusted, for which you've had to go out and work and expend hard sweat equity and labour in order to pay me back, I'm going to keep the note that you signed, which is cash. How about that for a deal? Now, no one would go for that. So in order for that to continue being propagated, either the banks are going to have to, as this information gets out, they're either going to have to silence everyone, because imagine the scene when everyone on Blighty is aware of this, 25 million householders and their partners banging on the doors of the banks, demanding that the police arrest them, demanding that the courts take action. What are these people going to do? How can they not take action? Well, one option is that they kill everyone. Right? That's number one option. That's an extreme, but that is one option, which hopefully, as I said to the FSA, is let's wipe that option out off the book. Let's say that that's not going to happen. Option number two is that they could, I suppose, drag out the army and imprison everyone and just change the entire face of the planet and how things operate, but people are then going to know that they're slaves. So that's not going to go down too well. There might be a bit of insurrection there. People might get killed. It might go down the avenue of option number one, which was to kill everyone anyway. So option one and option two, really, we'd like to rule out. Option number three is that the banks could be really honest, just say, hands up, we've done wrong. Let's do a full reimbursement of all payments made on all current mortgages and past mortgages, reimburse all the money, wipe off all the mortgage base. But then what you'd get is you'd get a whole host of bank staff out of work and an entire collapse of an industry, which would then have repercussions throughout the rest of everyone's life. Food, this, that, and the other, using credit cards, buying petrol, this, that, cars, whatever it is. So that would kind of affect things negatively there as well. So really, I don't think the banks would want to do that anyway, so let's rule that one out. So the only option we've got, the realistic option, bearing in mind that this information is doing the rounds, and I would urge everyone out there to make sure this information does the rounds, is that the FSA oversee a policy similar to that as the PPI situation, where, and the PPI thing has not been handled properly by any stretch of the imagination, but in theory, whereas people realise that they've been had and that this mortgage is a con, or that their loans are cons, that they are able, without fear, to approach their mortgage lender and get their money back and get the charges wiped off their properties, and they don't prosecute the bank for fraud, and the bank doesn't try and harass the people for money or possessions. Now that seems to me to be the common sense, logical way forward. If the FSA doesn't want to do that, okay, then my reaction to that would be that we summons FSA members of staff and FOS members of staff, along with bank staff, to criminal proceedings. Now, again, when we come up against HMCTS, we know that that is part of the game. We know that they're making vast profits in cahoots with the banks. They may not want to play ball. That's cool. I'm not going to sweat that. That's fine. Because, and we'll test it on the 12th of April with my action against the unsecured lenders, if banks don't want to come forward and be honest, and they want to pull strings with the courts, and if the court doesn't want to see a criminal prosecution go through, brilliant. And I'll tell you why that's brilliant, because the court will have just deemed itself to be unfit for purpose. If it won't prosecute banks for fraud, okay, and if we're all equal before the law, then that means we can all engage in fraud.
I mean, it's just a protection racket. It's a conspiracy of silence, just not allowing the matter to come to light.
Of course it is. And the problem is, it kind of highlights a problem, right? So either the people within the court service are going to recognise this, because if they don't play ball, then they are basically sealing their own fate long term, because this information is out there, big style.
Mm-hmm.
I'm bumping into people on the street, and or in shops, and I'm mentioning stuff about money, and people know. They may not know as in depth as a lot of people that study this full time or quite hard, but they know there's a problem with the money. They know that there's already that 100 monkey syndrome has gone round regarding Bank of England notes.
Well, just let me just interrupt you there, Si, because I actually came across quite a stunning piece of mainstream news. Now, admittedly, we're talking about a news channel in New Zealand, but it's called 7 Sharp, and they're a relatively well-established mainstream news channel. And they had a very, very 10-minute kind of piece on do you know where your money comes from? And it made the rounds on a few internet sites, and it literally features a short interview with an economist, sat in front of a big stack of financial books. And he does quite calmly kind of express his surprise that people don't understand that money is created from nothing. And this is a mainstream news channel that we're talking about here. So it's not as if the cat is not out of the bag in some places. It very much is.
Well, this is the funny thing. And you see, the funny thing is, this is why, bearing in mind that top economists know this, okay, and so top boys do know this. And, of course, we know that, the mainstream, a lot of people have been conned. And the reason we've been conned is because, let's look at it this way, those leaflets, those marketing leaflets, all right, as I say, I've got no problem with a bank saying to someone, look, I'll give you access. If you want that car now and you don't want to save up for it, okay, I'll let you get that now by extending you credit on my book. But in order to do that, you're going to have to donate to me an instrument which I can go in cash somewhere else. So that's called the credit agreement. That credit agreement is going to create the loan advance to you. So you're lending yourself the money, but I'm going to charge you interest on that. You're going to have to get involved in sweat equity, hard time to pay that back with the interest. And if you don't pay it back to me, even though it was yours to begin with, I'm going to repossess your property.
Yeah.
Now, because they don't portray it like that, they get lots of business.
I mean, if they just came out and said, hey, want a new Mercedes, then enter my system of usury, I'm sure that car sales would slump that year.
Absolutely. And this is why, they advertise it in the way they advertise it. This is why they put the spin on it that they put the spin on. Because from the bank's perspective, they're in a no-lose situation. They gain massively, even if you don't even pay the loan back. In fact, this brings new meaning to when I was at Welcome Finance saying that they didn't actually need customers to pay their loans back. They only needed customers to pay back a third, and they would make money.
Right.
Now I understand what the hell that was going on about.
Sure, yeah, makes more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so the situation is, this is a scam whereupon banks are then moving real property from people to the bank, because there's always going to be a percentage of people that can't pay. And it's those people that get hoovered up first, all right? And then, of course, as the bank's influence, because remember, the banks are actually gambling against us. I forgot to mention, there's insurance policies behind the scenes, people, gambling against you. So not only am I offering you that deal as the bank, but I'm also going to be saying to you, I'm also going to be taking out an insurance policy, gambling against your ability to perform on this loan.
Wow.
In other words, it's in my interests that you fail. Now, do you want to sign this piece of paper, put up your hard sweat equity and hard labour to have access to money which was created by you? You've lent yourself the money, but you're going to pay me interest on, and I'm going to take your assets if you don't perform. And I'm gambling against you being able to do that. So it's in my interest that you fail, and I've got my feelers into lots of other things like petroleum, like food, like this, that, and the other, so I can affect the cost of living. I might even employ you, or one of my buddies might even employ you, so perhaps I'll get him to give you the sack, shall I? So that I can win, because it's all about profit for the bank. Now, if that true picture was painted, you'd have a situation where the banks wouldn't have as much business as they get now. People would be a lot more wary. We'd have the attitude of grandpa and grandma, where it's don't borrow from the banks. And, of course, the banks would lose out on loads of real asset, pure profit. Now we know why. It's in their interests to lie on their marketing material. But lying on their marketing material gives us a fantastic remedy, and that is fraud by false representation. Because what you do is you then reword this back to the bank and you say, well, you show me where it said that you weren't lending anything. Show me where it says that. Show me where it says that I'm the one taking all the risk. Show me where it says that when I sign the credit agreement, that turns into a security and that's treated as cash. Show me where it says I'm never going to get that back and that I've gifted that to you and I've allowed you to sell that for extra profit. Show me, show me, show me, show me. Because if you can't show me, then that's fraud by false representation, because fraud by false representation is a false representation which results in either one party, us lot, losing something, or another party, the bank, gaining something. Well, in the bank fraud, all three happen. There's a false representation, the bank gains, and we lose. And we lose the value of that security, which in our hands might be worth nothing, but did you really want to gift that to a bank? Because in a bank's hands, that's worth extra money. So did you want to give the bank an extra £10,000 spending power to spend on his Ferrari? I think not. I'd rather have that back and burn it, just out of principle, right? That's my attitude. But the point is that if they sell that behind the scenes, which they do, the currency they receive for that sale is owed back to you. And if that's owed back to you, and if you owe them, then really, when it gets down to you've paid the interest off your loan, the rest should be wiped off, called set-off, right, if they've sold the agreement. So really, that would reduce, let's say you're paying £2,000 interest on a 10 grand loan, what you would actually pay is £2,000. And that's the loan paid off, if the bank keeps the security. If they return the security to you, then yes, you've got to pay the other 10 grand, as long as they advertised the true nature of that contract properly. All right, so I'm hoping I haven't confused people with that. I know I tend to jump around a bit, but...
No, it's fine. I mean, basically, so you're just illustrating that these guys are now on the world's most sticky wicket, and there's very little room once kind of you're educated about the real facts and the real operations and you've asked the real questions, there isn't too much that they can actually do about it. But what you mentioned earlier is that Santander have been extremely quiet just over the simple question of the power of attorney. Where, I mean, obviously you've raised a dispute with your mortgage now, and so haven't paid it for coming up to a year. Where do you see it going? Where do you see this ending up?
Well, I offered Santander the opportunity of sorting out my mortgage.
Yep.
Okay, or sorting out all of their mortgages. Okay.
This is the deal, right?
This is the deal. I've made them an offer. I said, you can either nudge, nudge, wink, wink, sort my one out, and I'll keep quiet about it. Yeah, right. Big hope, Bob hope, no hope. Or I'm going to tell the world, and I'm going on a crusade. In fact, I've used that word once before, and I got a payout from an alternate company, and I haven't used it yet with Santander. But I'm going to go on a crusade, because I'm sorry, I know what I'm like. I know what kind of guy I am, and I'm not going to be bent over a barrel, right, and taken roughly from behind so some bank can make big profit at my expense. I'm not having that. That just doesn't taste right to me. And so the offer I made them was that, if they didn't want to sort this one thing out, for taking a commercial view on it, then I'd see to it that all of their customers knew about it and they can sort all of their customers out. Because, the thing that these bankers have got to understand is that as people wake up, and this is what makes me smile, as people wake up, the planet becomes a very small place. And there are some nutters out there, and I mean that nicely and lovingly, but there are some people that would take this to the nth degree. They'd actually probably bring out nooses ready to hang bankers, right? I mean, I hope I never get hung right, by some old customers. I didn't know, honestly. But this is one of the questions I posed to the FSA guy. I say, well, look, what are people going to do when they think that I've ripped them off? And I didn't know, right? And there are lots of bank staff that are being used as instruments of fraud, although I would say when I was a banker, I never had the kind of queries coming in that free men send in.
Right.
If I had, I know I would have investigated it. I know I would have done, right? Because I would have wanted to use it myself, right? So the thing is, bank staff now, when they're being asked to investigate or they promise to investigate, they've got no excuse. And so as people are waking up, and I would certainly emphasize the importance of education. You've got to tell everyone, get it out there. Because the sooner everyone knows, the sooner this bullshit is going to be dealt with and over and done and dusted. And anything that's been taken from you or anyone out there by way of fraud, you will and can get back. Period. Right?
Sure. So this, you're talking about the biggest potential shake-up to the global financial markets. I can't think of much of an exception. So the changes that could stem from such a level of disclosure of this sort of information, especially if it got to a court, especially if the court ruled in favour of yourself in that kind of situation, saying that yes, the mortgage is void, everything that stems from this single fraudulent contract or agreement is therefore void, it's all due back to you. I mean, you are talking about a systemic collapse there, aren't you?
Well, this is why I've tried to broker this deal with the FSA, because, I recognise that, right? I recognise that, and I don't want a massive collapse with people running around like headless chickens panicking, right? And a lot of people do panic, and it's panic which actually creates the problems, right? When, we as people, we are more resourceful than we give ourselves credit for. And what people need to do out there is, rather than just taking the EastEnders view of, oh my God, it's all going to collapse and go mad, is actually, well, no, sit back. How many times have you, anyone out there, as an armchair politician or as an armchair football manager, actually decided that you had a better way of doing things, right? So have a cigarette, calm down, chill, and then give it a few moments thought. Because when you start giving it thought, the remedies are very, very simple. They really are. And number one is not to panic, not to believe the hype and get all panicked about it. Number two, if we can broker a deal with the FSA, as people, this is a slow process. There are various things with the monetary system that could be changed overnight, but that would require the complicity of this alleged government, which is in fact a private business outfit itself. But if they decided to actually see sense, realizing and recognizing that the Earth is a small place, and that as people wake up, that those in power are going to fast find themselves a minority, and are fast going to be looking for places to run. So unless they've actually got some kind of spaceship, I don't know where they're going to go to. But
then maybe they have.
Maybe they have. Let's hope they have. They can go to the planet Uranus. But anyway, so that aside, they're going to have to do something unless they're going to come out and kill us all. Right? And if it gets down to killing us all, well, then I guess it's a free-for-all, and anything goes, string up who you want kind of thing, if they work for government, right? But that aside, let's pretend it doesn't come to that. So we look for positive solutions. Positive solutions are that we do this on a waking up basis as someone decides that they're not happy with their mortgage and they want their money back, that they get it. Now, there are plenty of people out there that even when I've told them about their mortgages, they're happy to pay it. Well, fine. That's cool. There will be a percentage of people that are like that. There will be a percentage of people that don't want to know. There will be a percentage of people that are indifferent. There will be a percentage of people that want their money back. No worries. There will be some that just want the balance wiped off. There's going to be a whole myriad of variation. Mm-hmm. And I think what needs to happen is that the FSA need to recognize that there is a problem coming over the horizon. They can prepare for it now, or they can try to deal with it when there is a stampede of people wanting to batter their door down and string them up. And it is their choice as to when they make that decision and to how they put that into play. But I would suggest that it is a very poor, short-sighted perspective to have if they decide to ignore it all. Now, when it comes down to court action, exactly the same kind of thing applies with the court system. We know that this is an interlocking system of body corporates or unincorporated corporations or whatever they want to call themselves. But we know it's a boys' club, and we know that these boys are making a nice amount of profit off of us. But this profit only continues, and this prestige and respect that people give to these people only continues while we're all ignorant.
That's it.
The moment we're not, you have a situation of the emperor's new clothes, where the emperor's meat and two veg and backside are on display for everyone to see, and everyone's laughing at them whilst they walk down the street thinking that they should be respected and try to stroke their own ego. So it is a matter of time, and I do my utmost to make that time period short as to when everyone wakes up. But when it comes down to court action, and this is something which, for anyone that was aware of the council video that I put up briefly, took down, and I'm waiting to get back up again.
Yeah, what happened to that video, actually? That was, just to segue into that, was that all councils are liable for, well, all your liabilities become your council's liabilities. Is that right?
Yeah, 1888 Local Government Act, Section 79, subsection 2, all liabilities of the inhabitants of a county are in fact the liabilities and duties of the county council. Now, when you go back, someone actually sent me or put a note up saying, yeah, but check out the liabilities definition. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I had some typos on the video. They put up this little quote, and I thought, okay, I need to extend it and encompass the Municipal Corporation Acts from 1835, 1882, and the Local Government Act 1933. And in essence, what it is, it's a situation very similar to the Universal Community Trust, whereupon, or any trust situation, where the council is a trust.
Mm-hmm.
It is a trust. It was always intended to be a trust, except there's two trusts. Imagine the North American Indians, right? And white man arrives on their shores. And so you've got the inhabitants of America, the Indians, and they had a council of elders, the county council. And white man was trying to bring over corporatocracy, right? And all these corporate bodies which have no authority over people, but they're there to make some kind of fictional bullshit profit. Okay. And they would go to the council and say, we want to impose these debts or these charges against the inhabitants. And it would be the council's responsibility to say, yes, we accept those bills, or no, we don't. Show me the validity for them. Now, because people being lazy, and also way back when being inarticulate, unable to read or write, lack of communication, no internet, no telephones, no mobile phones, no emails, a postal service, but not necessarily that reliable, because of all those obstacles, it was very easy for the old-fashioned council of elders, the county council, the council for the county, to actually come together. And it was very easy for a corporate body to come in and take over that role, which is exactly what we've got now. But the role was always intended to operate as a trust. And that is detailed in the Municipal Corporation Acts. In fact, the first Municipal Corporation Act was brought out as a result, get this, as a result of local officials giving contracts to their friends, pilfering money, theft, coercion, corruption, right, abuse of office. That's what the first Municipal Corporation Act was brought out to combat.
Right.
Sound familiar?
Yeah, it does.
2013, doesn't it, right? So we can see that there's been a power struggle all the way through the ages. And so bringing this back to courts, because the county council was responsible for appointing judges and appointing courts. So if the court system, which is a corporate court system, locked into the interlocking game of the big boys club, right, or the one trouser leg club, if that if that's all corporatocracy and they're all scratching each other's backs, what do you think the people should do if that court system has lost credibility and has brought itself into disrepute and shown itself to be fraudulent?
Well, I think they should make their own.
Absolutely, mate. And so the hearing that I've got on the 12th of April is a win-win situation for we, the people. Because I'm going to go in there with this private prosecution against 6 banks for unsecured credit, and if they don't allow this through, with me assisting the CPS, if they don't allow this through, and if something positive does not come out of this, then as far as I'm concerned, that is just cause to convene a grand jury ourselves and to start holding our own courts. And a website is already being built. I'm preempting this. I'm working on some standardized paperwork, just as an example for people. People can do what they want, okay? But the idea being that we film it, we do it as transparently as possible, right? That's all you can hope to do is hold a court. If you're going to hold a court, all you can do is hope to have it as honest, truthful, and transparent as possible, right? Because you want to come to a verdict or a conclusion which is just, right?
Sure.
Which is true and based on truth. You don't want bullshit and I'll pay you this if you decide with me and blah. You don't want all that corruption crap. No. You want a just decision. And so I'm going to come up with some ideas as to how I think it should be run. But what I think we need to do, the only way of taking the power back is, and I know people will say, yeah, but it's not going to have recognition in their system. That's the point. The point is we need to change where the recognition is. We need to stop recognizing a system that keeps corrupting us and giving us the shit end of the stick. And we need to start showing recognition to truth, transparency, and justice and dealing with each other in an honourable, honest way.
Sure, I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's always been, for me, the most powerful court in the world is the court of public opinion. And if the public opinion is shown that it's no longer trusting in the kind of institutions and the framework which is meant to guarantee justice and equality, then you have to go back to scratch, and it has to be something that the people then reconvene.
Absolutely, mate. And this is exactly where I think this is an opportunity to do it. Now, I know other people have been doing it their own thing. Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. I'm going to do my own thing as well. As far as I'm concerned, I will convene a grand jury. We will film it. We're going to start holding, and we've got, as a collective, we've got so much evidence to show how corrupt Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Services, the company trading as HMCTS, how corrupt that company is, okay, that as far as I'm concerned, I'm looking for one opportunity to declare that unfit for purpose, null and void, right, fraudulent, and then it's a case of, thanks very much, you just created your own demise. Well done, right? You've just sealed the deal, because now we're going to go forward, naming names, shaming shames, inviting people to come along and defend themselves, right? Or prove X, Y, Z. We will do a proper convening of a court. I will suggest that you invite, wherever you hold a court or convene a court, okay, you invite a local JP or magistrate. You say, yeah, hi, come along and observe. See how it should be done, right? Let them come along and observe, and then the 25 jurors, they literally bond the verdict with unlimited liability in the bullshit commercial world, right? Mm-hmm. They come up with their judgment. They all stamp and seal the judgment, which at the very least will give absolute power to a lien that follows that, all right? And I appreciate people are saying, well, this hasn't worked, that's not worked, so on and so forth, it's not worked. Believe me, I've gotten some juicy contacts where upon liens, I spoke to a solicitor the other day, worked for Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs. Mm-hmm. Funnily enough, he recognised commercial liens, and I talked him through the process, and he saw no problem with it.
Right.
That's from Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we know these instruments are valid. We know they can work. The problem is, we've not been contacting the right contacts to get them to work, right? But they do work. So the thing is, however we then take these judgments from the public court of record or the people's grand jury, whether we try to get that enforced in the High Court, give them another chance. If they don't want to do it, no sweat. Because as more and more courts and as more and more people start convening their own courts and casting judgment upon those that are local to them or causing them harm, and these names and faces go out up on the internet, as you rightly say, the power of Rome always vested in the mob. And the mob was the people, the public opinion. And as this information goes round and as it spreads, once you see it for what it is, there's no going back. So the boys at the top at the moment, who think they're at the top at the moment, yeah, that can easily be turned upside down. I would suggest to all of those players, I know a load of them are in there, they may not like what's going on, they may not like it but may have profited from it, they may love it and have profited from it, but ultimately their time is coming to an end.
Yep. I think you're right. I think that
they can either allow the ways to pass smoothly, or they can allow it to not pass smoothly. But all I would say is, if it turns into a revolution, and I wouldn't want to see an all-out revolution. I'd like to see, this done kind of calmly, etc. But if it did, well, history shows us the first ones to bite the bullet are judges and solicitors and barristers, who were always first to be hung, drawn, and quartered.
Well, I hope it doesn't come to that. I'd rather that we saw an evolution rather than a revolution, because you always end up back where you started.
Me too, mate. I'd rather see these guys recognise that this system and the way that it's been, there's nothing wrong with the system per se, but it's the way that it's been subverted. And if this subversion continues, then on the consciences of all those guys and girls out there that are in powerful positions is going to have to be the deaths of everyone else, because it's the only way they're going to be allowed to continue operating.
It's the one thing that's handed down all the time is the idea that it's always been the people versus the banks, and sooner or later it does have to come to some kind of meaningful conclusion, because we do seem to be forever in this semi-stasis of knowing that there's a huge problem, knowing that the system is unfair, but never really quite grasping exactly why. And I firmly can see the illusion, and I think it's just, as you say, like a matter of time until it's propagated enough that we go past that point.
Well, you think of the situation, I quite openly now, I phone up the banks and I quite openly tell the staff to tell their directors that they're fraudsters. And if they don't like it, they know where I am, sue me. Right? Sue me. Now, imagine the scenario when loads of public courts are going on, the people's courts, and videos are going up showing the documents. Hopefully this website that we're getting created is going to allow documents to be put up. So that's going to be great for templates for people to learn from.
Sure.
The information is going to be there. Names are going to be named. And then we'll even put out wanted posters, on the website, basically having in a wanted picture the faces of these directors of banks for fraud, right, against the people. Now, imagine the scene when these top boys are walking down the street and people are pointing at them, laughing at them, and calling them fraudsters. I don't think they're going to like that.
Calling them outlaws.
Outlaws?
Yeah, this is what we're doing. We're identifying real outlaws.
And this is what we should do. So, to people like at HSBC, if you don't like being called a fraudster, sue me. But you are fraudsters, each and every one of you. Directors of HSBC, MBNA, Capital One, Barclays, who else did I deal with? Royal Bank of Scotland and Halifax. I, the Spaniard, and you can find out who I am online, am calling each and every one of you a dirty low-down scumbag fraudster, right? Guilty of theft, okay? And if you don't like it, sue me for defamation.
So you mentioned the idea of convening a public court.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea on the sort of timescales of this coming about?
Yeah, I was thinking of doing it on my 44th birthday, which is the 16th of May. So if I don't get anywhere on the 12th of April, I'm going to try and find a location. I've already had people, someone actually says they think they can get me a time slot on Sky TV with it as well. So...
are we talking about the Edge? Are we talking about...
Well, I don't think so. I wanted to make sure it wasn't one of those, wasn't going to be a slot in between girls half naked. And,
Yeah.
But the point being that rather than worrying about what that fictional system recognizes, we need to stop worrying about that, and we need to start existing in the reality, and we need to start relying on people power, and we need to start making it happen, right? And bringing the crimes of these people behind the scenes at banks, etc. We need to bring that out into the open, get it publicized, and get it around mouth to mouth, hand to hand, email to email, Facebook to Facebook, and we need to get it around so that people know exactly what these people look like, these fraudsters look like, what they're doing, and what they've done. And there's no better way than to just say, right, I'm no longer recognizing your crap. You can put me in jail if you want, but all you're doing is committing a crime against me.
Mm.
And you're giving me an educational opportunity to educate other people. So it's good in that respect, and you're going to feed me 3 times a day. Brilliant. So we look at it from the positives. We know, and we have to have a sense of being that this is all going to be over soon, right? It will. There's only 8 billion people on the planet, right? Once you know, you know. So the numbers are increasing massively, exponentially, every day, right? I see it even on my Poxy email list, as to, relatively small, how many numbers are coming through every day. So I see it on that. So I can see and sense that people are really beginning to get into this stuff and see the fraud for what it is. No matter what their reasons for getting into it are, they can see that something's not right. And we just need to take that recognition, just like in Nightmare on Elm Street when the girl turns her back on Freddy Krueger and just says, you're a piece of shit, you don't exist anymore. And he disappears. Yeah. And that's what the attitude we need to have. And the only way to make people's courts valid is to start holding them.
Yeah, with you, 100%. And we want to help you do that and publicise it and everything. So, well, I'm looking forward to seeing that first video come up with the Spaniard sat in the people's court.
Well, me too, man. And I'm quite happy to do it as fair as possible. I want it to be fair. I want it to be balanced. I want it to be, open, honest, and transparent, because there is no point us copying the fraudsters that are Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunals system and those alleged judges. What's the point of walking around in a wig and a skirt, parading up and down, talking crap, right, which is just gobbledygook, when, in essence, we can actually put some foundation into something that actually has some meaning and is more valid, and hopefully people would walk away. See, the kind of court that I would want is I would want to go to court where you feel that you've had your say, but if you've done something wrong, you at least feel that you were heard, it was appraised fairly, and that reasoning be given for the judgment, so that you can at least turn around and say, yeah, okay, fair enough, I buy that.
Yeah, maybe well, how about
wrong, maybe I was hot-headed, whatever.
How about just having it so that you could not have to pay someone on your behalf to translate what the hell's even going on in the courtroom?
Well, that as well, man. I mean, we know the tricks. I mean, let's put it this way. All I would say to people out there is that, bearing in mind, we've kind of woken up, or when you wake up and you start navigating the different language that's in existence on this country, right, at the legalese, mm-hmm. and you start playing with some of this stuff, everything has been stacked up against us, right? Everything, right? The indoctrination, the schooling, the food, everything, right? The way that they play the game, the subtleness, the language that's been built up over hundreds of years, it's all been stacked up against us. So pat on the back, everyone, for having woken up to this shit. Right, massive pat on the back, right, to everyone out there. This is a team game. Yeah, there are some big mouths like me out there who don't mind getting on and trying to G everyone up, right? That's what I used to do for a job. This is why, I don't know, if this helps with people, I'll carry on doing it. If I'm becoming a pain in the ass, I'll shut up, yeah? But it needs everyone to play their part and use their skill set to join in with the team and let's make this a better place to exist, because it can be. There's no reason why not, you know. The most intelligent beings, allegedly, in the universe, and this is the best system we got. This is bullshit, man.
We just want to keep enslaving each other and then lying about it, you know. It is remarkable. Listen, Si, we'll be watching closely with everything that's coming up in the not-too-distant future. Do you want to give out any contact details, any way that people can get in touch with the Warren directly, etc., etc.?
Absolutely. So anyone wanting to download the dossier, and sorry it's all gone off at the tangent at the end, but if you want the unsecured dossier, that should be on TPUC to download. If not, email whiterabbeteducation@gmail.com and I'll send you the unsecured dossier. The same goes for the mortgage dossier. Should be on TPUC to download. If you're not happy to download it there, email whiterabbeteducation@gmail.com, okay, and I'll get it emailed out to you. That aside, videos that back up the dossier are on White Rabbit Trust. Hopefully that's on YouTube. Hopefully you'll find a lot of the Spaniards playlists quite amusing. I certainly had fun doing a lot of it, and I've tried to get information. It's not exhaustive, but it's a start. I've tried to get information and break it into playlists, which makes it kind of a logical flow. So anyone that's brand new to this, feel free to just make the full use of the White Rabbit Trust YouTube channel. There's loads of information out there nowadays. Anyone that's new to this, you are very privileged, and you've got a lot of benefit, because there's been a hell of a lot of people come before you that have put a hell of a lot of information out onto the internet for you to look at. When myself and Richie were first into this, there was virtually nothing around to look at, and we had to go scrimping and scraping through Act of Parliament and law dictionaries to try and get snippets of information. So you're in a very privileged position. It does mean that you haven't had to work as hard for that information. Please respect the information, right? I find too many people just don't respect the information and don't respect the hard work that goes into trying some of the techniques out, right?
Yeah,
they expect immediate responses and immediate results, you know.
If I could just add on to that point, what that also means is do not download the entire document pack from Lawful Rebellion and then send it off to your bank and say, I'm not paying my mortgage and here's why, because they will they will know that they're dealing with someone who does not know what they're talking about, or does not know sufficient amounts in order to correctly kind of defend themselves or press the point home.
Sure. I mean, just to emphasize that point, yeah, you're totally right. The same goes for any template. Remember, there's a finite number of banks. There's 60 million people on this country alone, right? 60 million people sending in the same template. I think the banks are going to recognize when they're getting a template through. So the only way for the bank to then test whether you do or don't know what the hell you're talking about is to sue you. So don't use a template, right? I appreciate all the big fancy words. It looks very impressive. To be honest, I've had some of my best results when I've just spoken as if I'm speaking to Richie now. Right? But I've just stated it for what it is, and I've said, you explain to me why I would have done that, because that doesn't make sense. You can speak in normal language and get good results. Just be aware of that. The main thing is that you understand what the hell's going on, right, and how this has been played out. That's the first thing. And if that takes you a year or so, then fine, before you start dipping your toe in the water. There's some things on the White Rabbit Trust that you might want to play with to dip your toe in the water. But that aside, 12th of April this year, right, so it's about 3 or 4 weeks away, 1:30 p.m, Southend Magistrates. If you want to laugh, come down, right? I'm going to be down there an hour before, outside the court steps, because I'm giving each of the unsecured alleged creditors the opportunity to be paid off in full on receipt or in exchange for the original wet marked credit agreement. That's a promissory note, otherwise known as a security, otherwise known as a commercial instrument, otherwise known as currency, otherwise known as cash, right? And if they can't do that, then I have got every right to go into that courthouse and then seek to be able to prosecute them for fraud and theft. So we'll see whether anyone turns up. It'll be great to get some witnesses, and depending on what happens there will depend on whether we get our first court of public record that I'm involved with as a grand jury to be televised at a later date, which I'll let everyone know about.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely whip up some interest through the Facebook and Twitter and through the podcast that's going to go out and accompany it with the documents and an article. So we'll wrap it up there, I think, Si, unless there's anything more that you wanted to add.
All I would say is this. Their whole system, their money, their courts, everything about that system, or should I say not the system, but the people that are operating it from a position of control, is all based on belief, faith, and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it's based on, right? Nothing. It's a religion.
Yep.
All you need to do is shift where your faith, confidence, and belief is placed. And you immediately remove energy from that game, right? So you shift it over to people that are wanting to make the planet a better place. That's all you got to do. Yep. Shift your mindset. Shift your energy.
Don't be subservient to your captors, to the people that would enslave you. Just step outside that box. That's all you got to do.
Absolutely, mate.
Love it. Okay, thank you so much, Si, for your time today and everything that you've done up till now. I appreciate that this is not an easy journey and it is not a small task that you're undertaking. So you've got my thanks, forever on that one. So
no worries, mate.
Thank you so much.
It's a team effort, mate. It's a team effort.
It sure is, yeah.
I'm just one of the mouths, that's all. That's the way I see it.
Okay, well, listen, I'll be in touch anyway, and hopefully we'll get an update from you soon.
Nice one, mate. Nice one. You take care, and big love to everyone out there.
Cool. Take care, my friend.
Take care, man.
Bye-bye.